So I'm really pleased to have such an excellent group of panelists today. I will ask each of them an opening question before moving to the next panelist. Since we have 5 panelists, I want you to stay familiar with their qualifications as they answer their first question. So to my left is Andrew Kumiega. He is an assistant professor of analytics at IIT Stuart School of Business. Dr. Kumiega has spent more than 30 years applying his doctoral research on artificial intelligence to a wide range of challenges in the financial industry. He has worked for Infinium Capital Management, Spectrum Global Fund Administrator, and TD Waterhouse, a name I'm sure all of you recognize. So, Professor, let's start our discussion with an explanation. What is GDPR? When did it go into effect, and where is it in effect?
Okay. It's going to be kind of weird. For full disclosure, I'm not a GDPR expert. So I have what it is. I want to go through an example. So my wife has decided, shockingly, I need to get thin. I don't know how many people here have decided their wife has told them they need to get thin. So I'm in that boat. I'm going to ignore her, of course. I've been ignoring for a decade. So, happily moving along with my life, right? Now I have to buy a car. So first question I'm going to ask everybody, why does it matter? Why does this GDPR matter? The Europeans put it in, and basically there's 9 points, and they say the data is yours. So I have a simple question. Will my car rat me out? So let's go through this thing. Will my car rat me out to my wife? Because that's a real decision when I buy my car. So GDPR says, I got the points, you need to be lawful, fair, and transparent in the processing of data. Lawful means it should be based on a legitimate purpose. So does my car have a legitimate purpose to rat me out to my wife when I stop at McDonald's to get my McMuffin in the morning that I'm not supposed to have? I don't know. Fair? Fair means it should be responsible and legitimate. Transparent means a company must inform its data subjects about its processing activity. So I have a lot of students here. Who has read what they signed? Anyone? I do. I do. But who looked at their car and says, can my car sell the data that it collects on me real time? That's a real question, right? Now, if the car collects the data on me and says I'm going to the doctor, does that get shared with health insurance providers? It's not covered. Right now in the United States, that's not covered. My car has data, not my health provider. So I think I think the Europeans are right. So they said, okay, there's a limitation of purpose, data and storage. So what it's saying is there must be a purpose. No personal data other than what is necessary. So does my car have a right to give my personal data and sell it? My wife would like to know, trust me. Oh no, honey, I'm eating my vegetables for breakfast as I stop to get my muffin. You can laugh, but you can take the scenario a bunch of different ways. Privacy by design. That's something interesting. A data miner, someone who's built data, worked with huge data sets. A decade ago, no finance firms thought about fail-safe algorithms. The rush was fast algorithms. Let's get it in production. Let's make money. Let's move. And then all of a sudden, people started having crashes. And that's how I got involved in all the ISACA stuff. Big ISACA. I love ISACA. Because we started saying we had to design it in. If you believe in Deming, if you want data security, it must be designed into it. See, the Europeans got this right. It's got to be designed in. Not second. Not some program, I got to worry about later. Then they say you got subject rights. You, the person, have a right to be forgotten. So I'm going to ask everyone here a simple question. Put your hand up if you have an email account. Come on. All you got, guys. Who pays? Leave your hand up if you pay for your email account. Now look around, everyone young. Do yourself a favor. Why do you see the old people with their hands up paying for an email account, and you young people don't pay? So the next question is, do you think I can read your email legally and use that data? What's your guess? Yes. Can I sell it to make decisions on you for employment? The answer is what? Yes, I can. aggregate, I can play games. Depends on what you signed, right? You did a contract with me. If I said I can sell it to anybody, then the contract is what? So the Europeans are right. I own the data and I have a right to be forgotten. See, this is much bigger. When you start putting it in your own world, you start realizing the problem of not having a GDPR. Consent. So I have a consent. You have to tell me what it is. I have the right to get out any moment I want. The moment you do something with my data, I have the right to what? Leave. Data transfers. You got to tell me who you're selling your data to, my data to. Personal data breaches. It's pretty funny. I got a data breach a week ago, from a book publisher, Senegal. I know it's them. I have unique passwords for everyone, so I can track my passwords to the data provider. I called them and said, hey, you got a data breach. No, we don't. They're European. Yes, you do. No, you don't. Sure they do. How? I know they do because it's their password that's only for their account. You follow me? Well, what they're saying is, well, we're not going to tell you about a data breach. And oh, by the way, we sold it. Our data is managed by some other third party. So it's not our fault, which means you need a data protection officer. See, if you collect the data on me, whose responsibility is it to secure and make sure that data is correct? You. So now there's no more he that said, she said, they said. And it's very close to trading. In trading in 2008, with Dodd-Frank came in, they said someone signs the security of the system. That person is personally liable. There is no corporate shield. You do something wrong, you take the fine. That's where I think this is at. And the last one is awareness training. So when you think of where GDPR is taking us, I think it's really important that everyone's got to ask themselves, are they comfortable with their car telling everyone where they went, all their health issues, all their bad habits, and everyone in the world being able to buy it? That's a real question. That's what GDPR is addressing. Who owns your life?
Good. We're going to move on to Henry Beverly, who deals with data on an everyday basis in his job. He is the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the Clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County. His career includes tenures with Ernst & Young, Johnson & Johnson, and Abbott Laboratories. Henry has worked in the areas of multinational financial reporting, big data management, artificial intelligence and machine learning, cybersecurity, and blockchain. Henry also served as a U.S. Army military police investigator and station commander. I just learned he served in Europe, the Mediterranean, Panama, and Korea. Right. We were there at similar times. And so, Henry, you've dealt with data security throughout your career. From your perspective, what is the landscape in that field today, and how does GDPR change the landscape?
Well, the landscape today is ever-changing. Don't think of it as being a revolution, but an evolution. Our technology is improving. We're getting more into artificial intelligence. We're getting more into machine learning, which is basically pattern, identification. So there's so much new technology and powerful technology to help assist us as humans to be able to manage our data and do analytics and turn that data into something useful. So for us, ourselves looking at the industry and looking at public space and private space, that data is highly valuable. So one of the key issues that GDPR is not a problem. A number of individuals, when it first came out, they thought of, oh my God, it's going to be like Sarbanes-Oxley. I'm going to have to go through all this training, hire individuals just to manage my data. I'm going to have to communicate with customers and users. Guess what? GDPR has turned into a money maker for private industries. MasterCard recently announced GDPR has allowed them to normalize their operations in Europe. No more patchworks of different regulations to help manage the release of information, control of information, or dissemination of information to individuals and corporations out there. Like myself, and working for the Clerk of the Circuit Court, believe it or not, we process over 1.5 billion records a year. We're growing at over 145%. That is a phenomenal growth rate just because we started going paper-light, total electronics pretty much for our case activities. So what does that mean? That means then that information of every individual that interacts with our government, that their information is going through a court system, it is available for public dissemination. And believe it or not, those companies, Bloomberg, Financial Times in Europe, Equifax, TransUnion right up the street here, all of them are buying that information and assimilating that information globally. So what does that mean? Not just the individuals with a presence in Europe, you know, it's covered up under GDPR, but believe it or not, your data too is running parallel to that. So recently out in California, they've enacted a very similar privacy regulation that is almost in lockstep with GDPR. And for us professionals in the field, we do see a wave globally going around the world where countries and governments and other companies are going to start using that, you know, to help improve profit margins, normalize the data, normalize the release of the data, and create new business.
Excellent. Again, California, as is often the case, leading the way. Next, our next panelist is somebody who's been studying GDPR. She is Shuchi Jain, a marketing analytics graduate from and a marketing research analyst with IIT Chicago. Shuchi also holds an engineering degree in electronics communications. She started her career in India as a business analyst for Accenture Technology, then worked for startups in media, sports, and hospitality. Her current research study at IIT is analyzing consumer behavior with technology, focusing on data privacy and the impact of GDPR laws on social media.
Right.
So, Shuchi, what does your research show regarding the impact of GDPR and what effect do you expect it to have going forward?
Sure. So let me tell you a bit about what the research was about. The research started with the hypothesis that consumers have lost trust in companies. 72% of US respondents says that they boycott the companies who disregard their personal data. 64% of them said they've taken countermeasures to stop uploading their personal data on social media because they are using free available data for their own profit and they're not getting anything out of it. So what's this impact on GDPR? GDPR is implemented in EU, but with the current scenario with Facebook data breach and consumers getting an email with saying revised policy updates, and again we get this pop-up on our website saying your cookies is being tracked. All these have alerted the US residents as well. Now what has come out of the research explicitly is ignorance is a bliss. Good for the companies. But with GDPR, now the consumers are getting better informed. And now they demand for transparency and responsiveness from the stewards of these data collectors. One conclusion I could make through my research was consumers are not so much troubled about the fact that the data is being used. They're more worried about the fact how their data is being used. And so with GDPR, now they are more informed. They wanted to see, in fact, 42% of them wanted to see how the data is being used and how it's taken forward. 36% of them wanted to delete their data from the company's website. And 11% of them wanted to know what is done with their data. So to summarize my research, with GDPR, and now they're getting more and more informed, they want a transparency in place. They want an informed opt-in rather than just signing up the consent forms.
So for consumers, knowledge is power.
Yes.
Next to Shuchi is Dr. Maurice Dawson. I think some of you in the audience will know him. He's an assistant professor of information technology at IIT. He also serves as director and distinguished member of the IIT Center for Cybersecurity and Forensics Education. Previously, Dr. Dawson was an engineering manager for unmanned air systems and a senior program manager for rotary wing aircraft. He earned doctoral degrees in computer science from Colorado Technical University and in cybersecurity from the Intelligent Systems Research Center at London Metropolitan University. Dr. Dawson is the co-editor of 2 recent publications on digital security and cyber terrorism. The prestigious Fulbright Scholarship programs sent him to give lectures in Russia in 2015 and this past year in Saudi Arabia. Dr. Dawson, thank you for joining us. How are differences in data security requirements around the world, and you've been around the world now, how are those differences affecting operations?
Well, so when we talk about GDPR, first we have to put in context what is the European Union. So you have the European Union, but GDPR also applies to the European Economic Area, which is 3 additional countries. Switzerland is neither part of the EU or EEA, but they have the right to live and work in the EU. So you have that entire block. And when you think about the European countries, a number of them, they colonized a great deal of the world, so they have lots of operations in other countries. And so when you think about European citizens, not just in Europe or just in the Western world, but also Africa, Asia, and stuff like that, their data falls into the same rights. And so that is one of the issues. In my course, Database Security, students learned about some of the major issues with a microfinance organization in Ethiopia. How that a lot of the records were unencrypted on USB drives and just lost during a 4-hour trek to the capital city. So imagine if those had European citizen data on this as well. And so now the data is unencrypted, is being lost, a lot of it is being intercepted. When we talked earlier about email and if email is being, how it's being sent, the gentleman here talked about I pay for my email, but even with that, it doesn't mean the actual data is encrypted, there's no confidentiality. And so confidentiality around the world is very different. Some encryption is approved, some is not approved. You think about data at rest, data at transit, every single country is doing something different. And also the route of the data, how data goes from one nation to another, that becomes a big thing. So when you think about just privacy for the actual European citizens, well, what about how that data gets from point A to point B? If I'm going from sending an email from here to maybe someone in Georgia, am I being routed through like Brazil or Colombia or something like that? What are the actual restrictions or the laws or regulations that falls upon that data during that actual route? And so those are many things to think about, especially we are in a global society. So we have to really think about what is really the global impact and stuff like that, and knowing what are the regulations that are also with GDPR if you're going to do business with other countries, and then also the ability to and so that's something to think about as well.
So GDPR has a ripple effect far beyond Europe. And I'm glad you touched on that and gave us global perspective there. I'm going to move on to Ed Lamark, who I hope you had a chance to hear earlier, giving the opening address at the conference. He is the founder of Wealthpool, a Fintech startup company that's seeking to transform personal finance. Ed had a 20-year career as a trader and software developer in asset securitization for large banks, most recently with RBS Securities, formerly known as ABN AMRO. Prior to his banking career, Ed was with Andersen Consulting, now Accenture, where he assisted in designing computer systems for clients in financial services. Ed earned a master's in financial markets and trading from IIT and an MBA from Indiana University after first earning his bachelor's in mechanical engineering at Purdue. Full disclosure here, my daughter is a senior cheerleader at Ohio State University, and Buckeye Nation is still nursing its emotional wounds from a beatdown at West Lafayette 3 weeks ago, and I know Ed has season tickets, so good luck to your Boilermakers against the Golden Gophers tomorrow. Ed, how do you see organizations of all types and sizes dealing with these new data requirements?
Right, Brian. Well, as Mo said, the framework really is by region, and also where is the data collected, where is it stored. The issue with GDPR is that first letter, G, general. Okay, it's very general. Here in the United States, our regulatory framework is very industry specific, right? So for instance, Andrew, that writing out to your wife, okay, you got that choice from your insurance company, hey, put this device on your dashboard and you'll lower your premiums, 10%. Anybody sign up for that? Okay, I didn't, because obviously you don't want to know that you're exceeding the speed limit on a consistent basis, right? It might come back to bite you. right? So what industry is that? Is that automotive? Is it insurance? Really don't know, right? But as Brian said, I had a 20-year career in banking. The regulatory environment there is extremely onerous, right? We have all kinds of regs. It's all about protecting the consumer. In healthcare, you have HIPAA, right? It's very specific. As a subset of financial services, you have payment industry, right? PCI, it's very specific. So in lending, 100 years ago, Standard & Poor's, Moody's, they formed really to look at the data of our default and recovery statistics as consumers, right? And they help lenders make decisions about what risk appetite they want to take to lend to borrowers, right? So that industry really was fine for 100 years. Now, when you have more and more data out there, it's really refreshing to see these startup technologies like here in Chicago, Avant, right? Innova. They're looking beyond just your credit history, right? When you pull a credit report, you don't see rents paid, right? You don't see what you're spending at the health club, right, or on that Starbucks. You simply only see your wherewithal to pay back your debt. So data can be very valuable to help us as a consumer to help the products and services of companies of all sizes. Now, the wealth pool is much smaller than Avant and Innova right now. We hope to be big. Big companies, we're small ones too. But as consumers, we have to decide, do we want to let that service provider have more data to make better decisions and help us as consumers make better decisions?
Now, in trying to be transparent in providing data for various uses, how challenging is it to also protect the anonymity of the data?
Yeah, for those of you who were at the talk earlier that I gave, I think personally the way this is going, it has to be aggregated and anonymized data for businesses to really, it can't be at the household level, okay? Location data, right? Tracking data, that's very personal, and they're tracking that history. The likes of Google and Facebook, when you sign that user agreement, they're looking at that history. But take Uber, for instance, right? I don't mind the GPS getting me from point A to point B, but I really don't want them storing where I've been for the last 3 years, right? So you've got, you're not only, what's the most important thing you have in life? It's time, right? Probably second, not far behind, is your health and your data, right? And you want that really safeguarded. So the businesses of tomorrow, I think, are going to really leverage aggregated, anonymized data sets, right? And also reward you for not only your time, your attention, but your data. So you're going to get monetized. I think that's where it's going.
Okay. Now, Maurice, when trying to protect the privacy of data, what are the most common vulnerabilities? And what are the main challenges in trying to comply with privacy laws?
Yeah, so you can try to do what need to be done, right? On the forefront, you say, all right, I'm going to make sure that the data is kept private. Data, and then I'm going to the actual data. The user wants to erase their data, I'm going to erase it. The issue is how people set up their actual infrastructure. So you have what's called the common weaknesses and enumerations, the OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project. They captured the top 10 web vulnerabilities. And so vulnerabilities such as SQL injections are pretty easy to find. You can just go on the web, type in PHP question mark, and all these particular websites will come up. You can run a tool called and you go through the wizard and you just pretty much copy and paste and run the actual command to see if the actual website is vulnerable. And so that becomes a big issue in how this actual data gets hosted. Is it behind a particular database that's secure or whatnot? There's other tools such as Burp Suite, which is found on a Kali distribution for offensive security, that runs through 100 vulnerabilities, known vulnerabilities. And so they run through all these vulnerabilities. So companies have to make sure that they're able to employ appropriate security controls. To make sure their systems are hardened, that they're constantly looking out for what we call zero-day exploits, or exploits that come out every day. And so it is it's for companies to just be much more proactive instead of reactive, dealing with these security measures. Because one of the things is, if an organization is found liable, they can pay up to 20 million euros or 4% of their annual revenue. And so that's, that's a huge fault. And so you have large organizations and small organizations. You have to figure out what, who falls into what. But either way, that's a large sum for falling victim to one of these particular attacks or something like that.
So there are a lot of considerations that companies have to make now in handling data. Shuchi, what does GDPR mean for the collection of data and target marketing?
Sure. Again, I wanted to take an example from the B2C business model. And as it is said, marketers have lived through an era of big data. Then they lived through an era of personalization. And then now they are living through an era of consent. And that's what I wanted to emphasize more on, that the marketers should keep looking for more innovative methods to gain consent from consumers. Now, what I mean by consent is it's not just checking in the boxes and then moving forward. What I really mean is an affirmative sentence, an informed sentence to get them opt-in. Again, I wanted to take an example from what my research says. Consumers wanted to see these policies in terms of bullet points. Very simple. They should know what they are losing on, what kind of transaction they are making. A simple graph of about cost and benefit analysis, what they are losing on, a broad picture, and that's it. A 2 minutes or 2 second screen, and that's it. They can move forward. So 2 points I wanted to emphasize as far as data collection and market targeting audience is, first, personalization. What I mean personalization here is finding innovative methods innovative personalized methods to get consent from users. And the second I wanted to emphasize is education, educating the users how their data is being used. That's the most important I wanted to emphasize on, how the data is being used, and then the consumers flow along with you.
Okay. Henry, again, focusing on your international experience, how is data management technology impacting societies around the world, even in underdeveloped regions?
Well, I'm an old school accountant, and the first thing I always tell individuals, you got to know where you came from to understand where you're going to. So when it comes to GDPR, GDPR is not something new. This is not something that just sprung up in the last 24 months. GDPR, believe it or not, has been in various different forms on the books as recently as 1995 in Europe. So this has been a ramp up getting us to where we want to go. GDPR is not the end point. It is actually a starting point to where industries are going to. GDPR actually has its cousin, which is part of it, and I'm going to plant the seed in your mind right now. That cousin is the Electronic Privacy Regulation. It was meant to come out in concurrent time with GDPR, but guess what? Due to the political activities and how long it takes laws to get enacted and move forward, it did not. So actually now, GDPR is just going to be a chapter of the overall of electronic privacy regulation, which is some people call the cookie law, determining the communication of your data. So that determines how your data can be transmitted to other individuals. Now, as you look at the world and say the growing and developed nations, they are not going to take it step by step as they progress coming out to the digital world. They're not going to start off with the transistor, then go to the solid state environment, then go to the semiconductor environment. No, they will leapfrog with technology. And that is what we're seeing right now. If you go down to the Sub-Sahara, you go over to the Asia Peninsula, as you go over to Western China area, you will see the development of technology leapfrogging existing technology. So those individuals are going to have a more robust infrastructure backbone. Those individuals are going to have some of the latest technology that is scaled for their environment, which is usually a mass population environment. So developed countries are going to find themselves being pulled instead of pushing the developed worlds. The hunger for technology and the capability to enhance their economic capability is what's going to propel them to be leaders in the forefront. So it's up to the global world to get in sync, so we all start turning our wheels in sync together as we move forward as a society. It's pretty much called civilization building.
Excellent. Now, Andrew, many of your students at IIT come from many different parts of the world. There are opportunities as Henry just noted, in many different parts of the world in data management. What would you like your students and students here in attendance and the professionals here in attendance to know about job opportunities in data management, and how does GDPR affect that?
I have it's a weird view of the world. I went from modeling to quality, to modeling, to quality, back to modeling, now to professors. And everyone say they're not the same. I see this world in revolution. What's revolutionizing is data. And as that data flows across these systems, you can't really be a good machine learning modeler if you can't govern your own data. Most of the people I've trained in high frequency trading started as quality analysts for me, which I would view as data analysts. First, you got to govern it, then you got to explain it, then you got to build your models. Because once your models start running, they're running real time and they can spiral out of control. So I don't see machine learning over here and data governance over here and quality over here. I see them all the same once you get up to speed. So what's speed? Speed for trading is 2 to 3 microseconds per decision. Speed for trading is 1 trillion messages a day. That's flowing live time, real speed. So for the students, I see it all as one. So and then for the professionals who are saying, well, I'm a modeler. Well, if you're a modeler and you don't understand your data structure, you have probably a severe problem. Because once that thing goes out of control, just like we had flash crashes in finance, you're going to have flash crashes for an insurance firm. Think about it. I'm quoting, I have a guy here, finance. You're making loans. You got bad data, you got a bad algorithm. And what happens when your algorithm goes along and you give a bunch of loans out? You can't call me back and say, sorry, all those loans are wrong, give me back my money. So this world, I think, is becoming one. And I think what GDPR is doing, as I sound weird, is leveling the playing field. So I'll end on my last comment before questions. I can buy data from shipping data. I've been able to buy it since 2007. I can tell you where every oil tanker is in the world. I can tell you where every barge is with grain in the world. We have data to know the exact amount of oil floating in every location. I can price it because I know how much supply and demand is everywhere. The traders don't want to tell you that, but we have it. So is it a level playing field? If I can tell you how many cars were sold this morning, which I can, if I can tell you how many hamburgers were sold this morning, and I can, is that front running in SEC? So the question opens up the next thing for GDPR for the regulators. What's material non-public information? So I see this, the regulatory people have got to start talking about the finance industry, the students got to start figuring out where do I start in this space and where do they go?
Excellent. I love the way you tied that together. Okay. Dr. Dawson, I wanted to come back to you. There is a shortage of people around the world who can handle data security. So all of these people, if they're in the data security field, are very wise. You students have tremendous demand in front of you. But how does GDPR affect the labor shortage around the world?
Well, I mean, before GDPR, by 2021, there was an estimated 3.5 million shortfall cybersecurity professionals. Currently, as of I think yesterday, there was 350,000 openings for cybersecurity just in the States, and I think around 40,000 in the greater DC area. And I think in Chicago we have like 7,000 openings. And so with these extra requirements requiring more stringent controls means that you need to have maybe more bodies to work on these particular tasks. And if you can't have those, you don't have those more bodies, it means you need to train more people or you need to move people from one task to another. And one of the issues that was brought up earlier was talking about just implementing technology in general, but also security has to be built in the forefront. Mm-hmm. So now you're trying to rush an implementation of GDPR because even though you had 2 years to implement it, a lot of companies did not actually implement it appropriately. So now you're just rushing all this stuff and you're missing stuff because you don't have the bodies or the know-how. And so that's a big issue. Even in the States right now, we have the Centers of Academic Excellence for the NSA. Only like 250 universities and I think over 4,000 institutions of higher learning have that accreditation. Mm-hmm. That's a big issue. So everyone is trying to teach cybersecurity and teach security control, stuff like that, but only 250 approximately have that particular accreditation or recognition by the NSA. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a big issue. And so as we add in more and more technology and more internet and web-enabled devices, Bluetooth and stuff like that, RFID, the workforce you need to ensure that these particular controls are in place are just not there.
Okay. I do want to open it up for questions. I hope you're thinking questions. I'm going to get one last question into Henry. How has your various professional experience helped prepare you to deal with changes in data regulations?
I will tell anyone, master the basics. Just recently, I posted an opening for a position for an individual to work as a system administrator. Believe it or not, within 48 hours, I had over 70 resumes in my hand for individuals that wanted to apply for that position. But what makes the candidates stand out, the individuals need to show the capabilities to be able to adapt to the changing environment. 2, communication. You have to be able to communicate to the masses, to the individuals you're going to be working with. That is very important. So, your math, your communication, your science, your technology, and having the gumption to be able to say, I'm going to take on something I have very little knowledge on and go out and master it. You got to have that drive inside yourself to say you can do something. And I'm going to tell you, in the United States Armed Forces, that's something we build from the ground up, and you can really see it when an individual is sitting before you interviewing. You don't even have to ask them, where'd you get your training from? It just flows out of them. So I'll tell any student today or any professional in the field looking to change fields, please master the basics, make sure you understand the industry that you're going in, and make sure you can communicate what you want to do and what you can deliver. That is what helps, being able to keep up with what's going on.